Sign it now, Gabriella, before we reconsider letting you marry our son. My soon-to-be mother-in-law, Diane, slid the prenuptial agreement across the gleaming mahogany table in their Greenwich estate, her diamond ring sparkling under the chandelier. Behind her, my fiancé Thomas sat quietly, avoiding my gaze, while his father, Richard, lounged back with the smug assurance of old money, assuming he knew everything. What they didn't realize was that the very table we were at, the estate itself, and every asset they guarded so zealously, I held the mortgage on all of it. The family meeting had been scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Thomas had given me a heads up the night before, his voice a mix of apology and resignation. Mom wants to talk about the prenup. Dad's lawyer drew something up. Just sign it, Gabby. It doesn't matter. I love you anyway. But it did matter. It mattered that after 2 years of dating, after Thomas proposed on a Maui beach with his grandmother's ring, after planning a wedding for 200 guests, his family still viewed me as a gold digger who brought nothing to the table. Now I sat in their library, surrounded by leather-bound books likely never read and artwork purchased for status rather than passion, while they lectured me on why I needed to renounce any claim to the Hartwell fortune. Let me be clear, Richard began, leaning back like a monarch addressing a subject. Thomas is heir to Hartwell Industries. When we pass, he will inherit this estate, the company, the investment portfolios. We've spent 40 years building this wealth. We're not about to let some, he paused, selecting his words carefully, elementary school teacher walk away with half after a few years of marriage. That's not fair, Dad, Thomas murmured weakly. It's perfectly fair, Diane interjected. Gabriella, I'm sure you're wonderful. Thomas clearly cares for you, but the facts remain. You make $52,000 a year teaching second grade. You rent an apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Toyota. You bring no assets to this marriage. She brings herself. Thomas spoke up, finally showing some backbone. That's enough for me. Sentiment is charming, darling, but it doesn't safeguard family wealth, Diane said, her tone saccharine and condescending. Gabriella, you must understand. We're not saying you're a bad person. You're marrying up. This prenup merely protects what Thomas has built, well, what we built for him. I looked down at the document before me. 23 pages of legalese boiling down to one stark truth. You're worth nothing. You get nothing. Sign here. Margaret Sto, my attorney, sat beside me, her face a carefully neutral mask. She had reviewed the prenup earlier that week, calling it one of the most one-sided agreements she'd seen in 30 years. She'd even laughed when she saw who was behind it. May I speak with my client privately? Margaret asked. Is that necessary? Richard frowned. It's a standard prenup. She signs. We move forward with the wedding. Simple. Mr. Hartwell, Ms. Rodriguez is entitled to legal counsel before signing any binding document. Fine. 5 minutes. We'll wait outside. The Hartwells filed out, Thomas shooting me an apologetic glance. When the door closed, Margaret turned to me, barely hiding her amusement. Are you going to tell them? She asked quietly. Not yet, I replied. I want to see just how far they'll push. Gabby, they're offering you absolutely nothing. No spousal support, no claim to property accumulated during the marriage, no provision for the kids. I know. And you're still thinking of signing? I'm considering it. Margaret shook her head slowly. Your choice, but when this blows up, and it will, I want to witness their reaction firsthand. The Hartwells returned, Diane carrying a tray with coffee and Quasinins, as though this were a casual social visit instead of a financial ambush. Have you made your decision? Richard asked, sinking into his throne-like chair. I have a few questions first, I said, keeping my tone steady. Naturally, Diane responded with practiced patience. We want to make sure you understand everything fully. The prenup says I have no claim to any Hartwell assets, including this estate. That's right. Correct, Richard confirmed. This property has been in our family for 30 years. Its current value is about $4.2 million. Clearly, we can't risk losing it in a divorce. Clearly, I agreed. And Hartwell Industries, Thomas's inheritance, is protected as well? Richard nodded. The company is valued at roughly $87 million. It will go to Thomas and remain entirely his. regardless of marital status. What about the investment portfolio mentioned in Section 7? Diane smiled. That's our retirement portfolio. $12 million in stocks, bonds, and real estate. We've worked hard to secure that, Gabriella. You understand why we need to safeguard it. I do understand, I said. One last question. What happens if your financial situation changes unexpectedly? Richard laughed sharply. Unexpected difficulties? The Hartwells have been financially stable for 3 generations. We don't encounter difficulties. Theoretically, I pressed, if circumstances changed, could the prenup be altered? The prenup is ironclad, Richard said firmly. Nothing can change it. Once you sign, you're bound for life. I see. I looked at Thomas, who was staring at his hands. Thomas, is this truly what you want? Finally, he met my gaze. Gabby, I love you, but they're my parents. This is their condition for giving us their blessing and funding the wedding. If we don't sign, they'll cut me off entirely. Cut you off? I repeated. From what exactly? Everything, Diane interjected. Thomas works at Hartwell Industries because we placed him there. He lives in the penthouse because we bought it. His car, his country club membership, his lifestyle, all provided by us. Defy this prenup and it all ends. I turned to Margaret. In your professional opinion, should I sign this? Margaret's eyes sparkled. Oh, I think we should review what you'd be giving up first. May I? She opened her briefcase and pulled out a new folder. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, I've carefully examined your prenuptial agreement. I've also reviewed my client's financial disclosure, which she's required to provide as part of the prenup process. I believe you should see it before Miss Rodriguez signs anything. Why? Richard frowned. She's a teacher. We know her finances. Do you? Margaret slid a paper across the table. This is Ms. Rodriguez's current net worth statement, prepared last month by her accounting firm. Diane picked it up and scanned the page. Her face drained of color. This can't be right. What? Richard demanded, snatching the document. What does it say? Diane whispered, shaking. Gabriella is worth $127 million. The room fell utterly silent. Thomas's head jerked up. What? There has to be some kind of error, Richard muttered, but the certainty had drained from his voice. This document, it says ownership of something called Rodriguez Capital Management. That would be my private equity firm, I replied evenly. I founded it 8 years ago after earning my degree from Wharton Business School. We focus on acquiring and restructuring distressed assets. Wharton, Diane echoed weakly. But you teach second grade. I volunteer in my old elementary school 3 mornings a week, I clarified gently. I teach reading to underprivileged kids. Giving back to the community where I grew up matters to me, but it's not my career. Your career is private equity, Thomas said slowly, staring like he was seeing me for the first time. Yes, Rodriguez Capital currently manages about $340 million in assets. My personal share is worth roughly $127 million. We acquire undervalued properties and struggling companies, restore them, and either run them long-term or sell them for profit. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the financial report. This lists holdings in real estate, corporate debt, and mortgage notes. That's right, I confirmed. 2 years ago, we purchased a portfolio of residential mortgage notes from a bank that was offloading assets, favorable terms, all current mortgages, just undervalued. Margaret smiled faintly. Mr. Hartwell, if you turn to page 3, you'll find a detailed breakdown of those notes. Richard turned the page. He froze. His complexion turned ashen. What? Diane leaned over and snatched the paper. What is it? One of the mortgages, Richard said slowly, is for 47 Lakeside Drive, Greenwich, Connecticut. He looked up, stunned. This address. That's correct, I said calmly. Your mortgage was part of that acquisition. I've held the note on your home for 23 months. The silence that followed was suffocating. You own our mortgage? Diane's voice was barely a whisper. The bank that originally financed your home sold the loan to a larger institution, I explained. That institution bundled it and sold the package to my firm. So, yes, technically, your monthly mortgage payments have been going to Rodriguez Capital. You've been paying me for almost 2 years. Thomas gaped. Gabby, why didn't you ever tell me? You never asked what I did, I answered simply. You assumed I was just a teacher. Whenever I tried to explain, you'd smile and steer the conversation elsewhere. You like the idea of a simple schoolteacher girlfriend. But 127 million. He looked stunned. I had no idea. Neither did we, Richard added, his authoritative tone completely gone. Gabriella, Miss Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. We made unfair assumptions. You assumed that someone who teaches kids and drives a modest car must be broke, I interrupted. You thought because I don't flaunt brands or talk about money, I don't have any. You decided I was marrying up without ever asking about my life. Diane's eyes glistened. We were only trying to protect our son. No, I said firmly. You were protecting your own sense of superiority. You wanted me to sign a document declaring myself beneath you, so you could feel safe in your hierarchy. Margaret cleared her throat. For the record, my client's version of the prenuptial agreement is right here. She slid another folder across the table. It's rather different from yours. With trembling hands, Richard opened it. This is incredibly generous, I said, and more than fair. I adjusted the document. It states that everything either of us own before marriage stays as individual property, mine and Thomas's. Anything earned afterward will be divided fairly, depending on each person's contribution and circumstances. There are clauses for children, for spousal support if ever required, and protections for both parties' business interests. Both parties, Thomas echoed. Gabby, I don't have business interests. You own everything. I just work for Hartwell Industries. That's still a business interest worth safeguarding, I replied. And Thomas, if we marry, I intend to invest in expanding that company. I've reviewed your family's business. It has incredible potential being wasted under overly cautious leadership. With proper funding and strategy, Hartwell Industries could triple its worth in 5 years. Richard scanned my proposed prenup, his expression growing more astonished. You're offering to invest $20 million in Hartwell Industries? If we marry, we become family, I explained. And I invest in family. But the structure would be a fair business loan. Your family keeps ownership, while I provide the capital for growth. Why? Diane's voice trembled. After everything we've done to you, why would you do that? Because I love your son, I said simply. And because I believe in lifting up the people I care about, not tearing them down. Unlike you, I don't measure a person's worth by what's in their bank account. Thomas reached across the table, taking my hand. Gabby, I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have really listened when you talked about your work. Yes, you should have, I agreed softly. But you're young, and you were raised to value appearances over substance. You can still learn. Can we start over? He asked. Can I finally get to know the real you? I studied him carefully, searching past the shame and confusion for the man I'd fallen for. Tell me, Thomas, do you love me because you thought I was just a modest schoolteacher who needed saving? Or because of who I truly am? I don't know, he admitted. I thought I knew you. Now I realize I didn't know anything. That's at least honest, I said. Diane spoke next, her voice subdued. Gabriella, what happens now? The mortgage, the wedding, everything. The mortgage continues as usual, I answered. Your payments are current, and the terms are fair. As for the wedding, I turned to Thomas. That depends on whether we can build something real, based on honesty instead of assumptions. And the prenup? Richard asked quietly. I stood, collecting my documents. Take both versions. Read them. Think about what they reveal about how we see each other. Mine assumes we're equal partners building a shared life. Yours assumes I'm a danger that needs to be controlled. Richard rose as well. We were wrong, Gabriella. Completely wrong. I'm sorry. We judged you through shallow impressions and our own biases. It was unforgivable. It was, I agreed. But, Mr. Hartwell, you should know something. I would have signed your prenup. They all stared at me, even knowing how unfair it was. Margaret asked. Yes, I said, because I never wanted Thomas's money. I never needed it. I was marrying him for love, not for access to the Hartwell fortune. Your version of the prenup would have protected me just as much as it protected you. It would have proven my intentions were genuine. But you didn't sign it, Diane murmured. No, I replied, because you needed to understand that value isn't measured in dollars. You had to learn that the woman you dismissed as a gold digger actually holds your financial future in her hands. You needed to be humbled. Richard gave a faint smile. Lesson learned. I moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. Thomas, you have my number. When you're ready to have a real conversation about who we truly are and what we actually want from marriage, call me. Until then, the wedding is off. Gabby, wait, Thomas began. No. You've spent 2 years dating a version of me that only existed in your imagination. Take some time to decide if you want to meet the real me. That will take effort, curiosity, and seeing me as an equal, not a project to save. I stepped out of the Hartwell estate, the very property I technically held the mortgage on, with Margaret walking beside me. That was incredible, Margaret said as we approached my car. Though, I still think you should have told them about the other properties. Other properties? I raised an eyebrow. Rodriguez Capital owns mortgages on 3 more Greenwich estates, including the one owned by Diane's sister. You basically control notes on half their social circle. I laughed. Let's keep that information tucked away for now. They've had enough surprises today. So what about Thomas? She asked. I unlocked my Tesla, the one I usually parked a block from his apartment, so he wouldn't see it. I'm going to wait and see if he's capable of growth. If he can look past his assumptions and actually see me. If he can. And if he can't, then I'll move on. I'm not interested in being someone's charity case or a trophy wife. I want a partner who values me for who I really am. My phone buzzed as I drove off. A text from Thomas. I'm an idiot. Can we talk? Really talk? I smiled and typed back. Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main Street. 10 a.m. And Thomas, come ready to ask questions about my real life, not the life you assumed I had. His reply came instantly, I will. I promise. And Gabby, I'm sorry for not seeing you, for not asking, for being exactly what my parents raised me to be. Awareness is the first step, I wrote. See you tomorrow. I slipped my phone away and drove toward my real home. A 3-bedroom condo in Stamford with water views, underground parking, and a home office where I ran a $340 million private equity firm while wearing yoga pants and volunteering at elementary schools. They had called me a gold digger, claiming I brought nothing to the marriage. They didn't realize I owned the gold mine. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learn something about judging people by appearances instead of character, about worth versus wealth, about the difference between having money and being valuable. Tomorrow, I'd find out if Thomas had learned that lesson too. And if he hadn't, well, I'd built an empire from nothing once before. I could certainly find a partner who valued me for more than my bank account. Either way, I'd be fine. I always had been. They just never noticed.